I pray that we will open our ears and our minds to the words we're about to listen to. The New Testament reading is from Luke chapter 11, verses 37 to 42. When Jesus had finished speaking, a Pharisee invited him to eat with him, so he went in and reclined at the table. But the Pharisee was surprised when he noticed that Jesus did not first wash before the meal. Then the Lord said to him, "Now then, you Pharisees clean the outside of the cup and dish, but inside you are full of greed and wickedness. You foolish people, did not the one who made the outside make the inside also? But now as for what is inside you, be generous to the poor, and everything will be clean for you. Woe to you, Pharisees, because you give God a tenth of your mint, rue and all other kinds of garden herbs, but you neglect justice and the love of God. You should have practiced the latter without leaving the former undone." This is the word of the Lord. Okay, so I'm going to mix it up a little here. I usually have my sermons all written out, but we were a little pressed for time this week with out-of-town guests and everything. So I'm just going to wing it. But, it's the subject I chose for the sermon part of this. There's going to be a sermon part, and then we're going to talk a bit about our trip to Uganda. But the sermon part, I didn't get the title of the sermon to Suzanne in time. It was supposed to be Alms. Because, the two readings that I selected, they aren't directly from the lectionary, but they're very close to the lectionary readings. But they both bear very strongly on this whole idea of charity, or in ancient Hebrew, it would have been Tzedakah, and then some various other terminology that we used for beneficence or doing good to others. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about that because the passage from Ezekiel and the passage from Luke are both very key moments in defining how we understand those terms and what they mean. And the tzedakah is a very ancient word in Hebrew. It's from the very earliest books of Genesis and everything. But it's really with the late prophets like Ezekiel that it kind of gets a little more, I'm going to say meaningful, because in the earlier books, there's talk about tzedakah, but it's not really explicitly defined. It's associated with justice, with righteousness, but it's never really explicitly defined. So it's kind of hard to wrap what exactly we're talking about. But in Ezekiel, it gets a very definite meaning. And so I'm just going to read through again the reading. Suppose there is a righteous man. So the righteous man is tzaddik, which is a cognative tzedakah, who does what is just, mishfut, and right, tzedakah. So you see right at the beginning, we're talking about the righteous man and what the righteous man does. He does not eat at the mountain shrines or look at the idols of Israel, but going on down the list, does not commit robbery, but gives his food to the hungry, provides clothing for the naked, does not lend to interest or take a profit, withholds his hand from doing wrong, and etc. And this is one of the first moments where tzedakah is explicitly tied to this idea of giving to the poor. And this becomes a very large theme in, of course, Hebrew ethics. There's kind of some discussion with theological scholars, because Israel was enslaved in Egypt. They have an inherent understanding or sympathy for the underdog or the enslaved or the oppressed, and this is reflected in their understanding of tzedakah. And Ezekiel, of course, is one of those prophets I've talked about in earlier sermons. He was part of this, help me out, Allison. Well, it was kind of a wave of axial age prophets, yes, and so he's kind of bringing a new understanding, and this understanding is actually very much reflected in Jesus's speaking to the Pharisees, because of course Jesus is talking to the Pharisee, and he's like, okay. I also want to mention one other thing about Ezekiel too, because this passage is kind of a debate between God and the Israelites. The Israelites are going, the Israelites had this idea that, the sins of the father are borne by the son, and, that you are blessed or you're not. Either you're of the nation of Israel and you're good, or you're not and you're bad. Ezekiel is bringing in this idea that, okay, even if you're not one of the chosen people, and even if you've been a sinner in your past, you can be redeemed by being tzedakah and just. And this is a very big change, and the Israelites are arguing against this. They're like, no, we're the chosen people. Ezekiel's like, no, you are known by your works, and that your works can cancel out even if you've been wicked in the past. And that comes to this whole idea of redemption that becomes such a big theme in the New Testament, and in the hymn that we had. Hymn was written by a former slave trader who late in life kind of had a blinding vision and come to realize what he'd been doing his whole life was immensely wrong and evil, and went about making amends to that. But in Jesus, in the passage from Luke, Jesus is kind of having a debate with the Pharisee. The Pharisees, I am perfectly just, and tzedakah, I give my tenth to the temple, I adhere to the dietary laws and everything like that. But then Jesus says, "You foolish people, did not one of you who made me outside make the inside also? But now as for what is inside you, be generous to the poor." And this is the word in the ancient Greek is Eleemysone, which I always have trouble saying. "And everything will be clean with you." And Jesus saying that, I'm thinking he's probably speaking Aramaic, and he's probably using the word tzedakah, but it gets translated in ancient Greek as Eleemysone. And this is kind of the primary word that gets adopted by Christianity, early Christianity, for service to the poor, almsgiving. But what Jesus is saying is, it's not enough to do the outward action. You also have to do it with what is right inside, with a love of God and righteousness in your heart, and then it will be so. So you give, but you neglect justice and the love of God. And if you don't have those components of your giving, then you're falling short. So Eleemysone, just to carry it on, so that's the primary term in the early Christian church. But then later on, we get this idea of, it's in ancient Greek, it's Agape, but gets translated as Caritas in Latin, and that becomes the primary word. So it's the Greek word for love, and that's in St. Paul you have the love, agape, as one of the chief Christian virtue, and that's what gets rolled into service to the poor. So I'm kind of interested in these things. I like the etymology and seeing how these evolving ideas of what our obligations to other people are. Does it stem from the love of God, from justice, from a Eleemysone, which actually in the Greek, it's actually rooted in the same kinds of words with compassion, pity, feeling sorry for somebody. You're feeling bad, so there's that rolled up into it. But then you get into Caritas, and there's the love element in there again. So just, I think it speaks to a lot of these underlying motives that people have in terms of doing good for others, and I think it gives us an interesting understanding. So that's my bit on charity, Eleemysone, Tzedakah, what have you. Now I'd like to have Jeff pull up some work that I think, at least for me, and I hope I'm not just like being nice and clean on the outside, and I'm doing this from coming from a good heart and sense of justice. But our trip to Uganda was really just a great experience. We were there on a Rotary trip to basically visit a school that we had helped build at the Eco-Agric Uganda, the Bill and Barbara Geyer Vocational Institute. And so we were there, but then at the same time we took the opportunity to visit with fellow Rotarians and visit some of the national parks. And but in the middle of all that, we also staged a health camp, which I'm sad Randy Hahn isn't here, because Randy actually put up the money to pay for this health camp. It was about, $3,500. So it was a 2-day health camp. And then the process we saw, well, it was over 530. I know that. The upper number we were not quite sure of. But I just wanted to talk a little bit about it because it was such an interesting experience, and it brought out so many kind of interesting angles. So this first slide here, the night before we had the health camp, our biggest fear was, well, we'd throw this health camp, we'd spend a bunch of money, we'd bring in Ugandan doctors and a dentist and a lab tech and a pharmacist, and nobody would show up, and it would be, that would be just the worst thing. So the night before, the group of us went to the local radio station, and there was a big table with all the way around, and there was a microphone that we kind of passed around, but got to interview us, and we talked about the health camp that was going to be going on. And you see a few of the people. There's Julian there, and Ashley Jennings, and then Allison and I. But the whole group of us was there. And then the next day, you can advance it again, we had the Rotary Health Camp. And you can see here's Lisa Jennings. And behind is the tents that we set up to shade the people who came to the health camp, so they weren't sitting in the hot sun. And yeah, so that's the waiting room. And as you can see, people showed up. There wasn't a problem in that. In fact, the biggest problem was we had to actually cut off at 200 people. We can only see that many people in a day. So we had tickets that we handed out. So actually, if you want to advance it to the next slide. So there's Juan. It was Juan Gomez, right? Yeah. He's kind of drawing out the ticket numbers and writing up the numbers, and then we handed out the tickets. So we said, anybody who has a number above 200, you'll have to go home and come back the next day, because we just don't have enough people to. I also want to talk a bit about Juan. Juan Gomez was, he is, he looks like he's maybe in his 30s. But he's 45, and I later discovered he's a commander in the Ecuadorian Marines, which is quite a high rank, actually. And he was actually serving the UN peacekeeping forces in Uganda, Sudan, between the kind of the warring factions between the north and the south in Sudan, and he had a holiday coming up, and so he was like looking for something to do. He couldn't go back to South America, but he could do something in Africa. So he got on a website and what are some volunteer opportunities that are available. And EcoAgric Uganda came up, and so he's like, because EcoAgric Uganda has a very active volunteer participation program to be bringing people in. So he signed up and he came up. So it was just purely happenstance, but what a great guy. I mean, he was just inspirational. And at the end of the whole episode, it was over 2 days, and he stayed a day or two longer after that. He was just, at the end of it, he was just like, this is one of the best things I've ever done in my life. Then the previous slide, you can also see there's Lauren Peacock, Ashley Jennings again, and then Alexia Bird, who is Julian's girlfriend. So they were our primary nurses, so you can see they're training themselves on doing the blood pressure measurement, which is kind of one of the pre-steps to getting to see the doctor. I got to weigh them because taking blood pressure is just a little too technical for me. Okay, next slide. So you can see here's Lauren practicing her craft. And then in behind there, you can see there's Ashley Jennings, and she's actually a pre-med student at Earlham. So this was just great hands-on experience for her. And you can see there's Allison in the distance. This is getting toward the evening, so light is becoming a little more scarce. It gets dark so quickly in Uganda, like 7 o'clock, the sun just goes out. Okay, next slide. And then we also have Alexia. She's, in addition to being Julian's girlfriend, she's also a nursing student at Ball State University. So, she just finished her first year of that program, so it's been all like classroom work. So we threw her to the wolves. And she got primarily given to the dentist to be, and he was like, well, have you ever pulled teeth before? She's like, no. She's like, okay, well, here's how to do it. So she was doing everything. She was administering the lanacane. So yeah, you can see she's giving the patient the shot. And then she's just pulled a tooth from a woman who's down in the corner there, which I think is just a priceless expression. But, and I actually, I kind of walked in on her one time, like I was wanting to photo document these things, and I walk into the room, and I didn't even know that she was like doing the extracting teeth and everything, but she was like over this guy, she's okay, next slide. One of the really interesting things about the health camp, though, was the second day, this fellow in yellow turned up, and he was kind of unique among the visitors the patients that we had, because he had his own personal bodyguard, who's on the right-hand side there. Really nice guy, but AK-47 at the ready, and well, he had been listening to the radio. So he is the local representative of the president of Uganda. Not exactly like a member of parliament or something, but more reports directly to the president. And so, of course, he has to be. Uganda is very peaceful now. They had a civil war back in the 90s, but everybody's kind of learned from that and have moved on. But there's still, slight bits of danger. And there was a conflict still brewing in Rwanda, between Rwanda and Congo, so there is a little bit. But anyway, this guy, he was listening to the radio program, and he was like, well, I've got these aches. I've got swollen ankles, and I can hardly walk, so I'm going to go check out this health camp. So he turned up, and Allison, of course, he gets directed to Allison, the one North American doctor that's there. And Allison, not only, well, he had been on some medications that were actually worsening his condition, and she gave him like a regimen for a trick. It turned out he had gout in his ankles, so, and she got him off a medication that was affecting his heart condition. So he was very appreciative, and I'm counting on the fact that he's going to bring a really good report to the president of Uganda, and maybe allow us to do more of these kinds of activities in the future. Next slide, if there is one. Now, this was kind of a tragedy part of the trip. So there was this baby, and you can see it's got a very large head, and so it's hydrocephalus. So he was one of the more serious patients that we had in terms of, I mean, at the stage that he was, if he didn't get treatment in a couple of weeks, he was going to go blind and then eventually brain damage. So Aliyai and Lauren Peacock and Lisa Jennings, we kind of pooled some money together to pay for them to go to Kampala to get the medical treatment the boy needed. And so they did that, and he was discharged, brought back home, but unfortunately he developed an infection or illness, and he passed away a couple days ago. So it was for naught. But you know, you have to do what you're moved to do. So next one. Well, the rest of it was just fun and roses, except for maybe some adventure down the Nile and some other things. There is a whole other section where I kind of show there's a refugee camp, which was what originally got us involved with Rotary in Uganda, and just people just living in absolute poverty, like literally mud shacks were their homes. But about 20 of them or so had been given scholarships to attend the school that we were helping to build. But to go through all of that, I think I would be going over time, and we have Charles, who's on a very tight timeline, and I wouldn't want to make him late. So I just wanted to share all of you, and I think I think that this brings another dimension actually to this whole idea of charity, tzedakah, Eleemysone, that there is a fulfillment that comes with doing work that benefits your fellow human being, your community, your friends, your family. It gives us a sense of purpose, and that's a very rewarding. So I just want to throw that in as an additional benefit on top of being just and righteous and in line with God and all of that sort of stuff. So that's about all I had to say. Sorry it's a rambling, but next time I'll write it down.